Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. People like this don't deserve compassion. With that, Bai Xiaochun proceeded along his way. Eventually, he took out the soulship and the violet pennant to study them a bit. They were clearly top-quality items, especially the little pennant. To his shock, he found that it was filled with more than 100,000 branding marks, all of them related to speed. Although it was very expensive to use, it could lead to speed of an indescribable level. Not even the clan chief could fully utilize its powers. It was just too unimaginably expensive. After some calculations, Bai Xiaochun came to the conclusion that using it for only one breath of time would cost 10 portions of mid-grade soul medicine. Not even the Bai clan could pay such a price for long. Most importantly, all of the sealing marks on the soulship and the violet pennant had been placed there by the Bai clan's Deva patriarch, meaning that they would be impossible for him to fully use without first breaking all of them. Even more worthy of note was that both of the items had benefited from 11-fold spirit enhancements. Bai Xiaochun could see golden designs hidden on both of them. Unfortunately, all of these combined factors indicated that he couldn't use either of them at the moment. Well, just give me some time. Maybe I can use Heavenspan River water to wear them away. After some thought, he tossed both of them into his big bucket of Heavenspan River water. When not being used, the soulship was small enough to fit in his palm. After tossing it into the bucket, Bai Xiaochun stopped thinking about it and narrowed his eyes. I still have to deal with the sealing mark that was put onto me. Frowning, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then began to slap his hands down all over himself. His qi and blood began to surge in a certain rhythm, pulsing through him as he attempted to cleanse himself. At the same time, he continued to flee. Another 3 days passed. It was afternoon as Bai Xiaochun fled when, all of a sudden, his expression flickered. Looking over his shoulder, he saw a brilliant beam of light streaking through the sky toward him. Within that beam of light was an old man on a soulship, moving at incredible speed, his face a mask of vicious, killing intent. Although Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure of the man's name, he recognized him. He was one of the Bai clan elders, whose cultivation base was very close to the mid-nascent soul level. He was also a member of the direct bloodline. Another one? Also alone? Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times and then cleared his throat, then simply slowed down to a stop. As the old man closed in and saw that Bai Xiaochun had the clan chief strung up and hanging over his shoulder, his eyes bulged, and he gasped. Without any hesitation, he lurched to a stop. He captured the clan chief alive. How is this possible? A look of complete incredulity played out on his face. He almost couldn't believe what he was seeing, and in fact, not even in his wildest dreams could he have pictured the clan chief being captured alive. It was impossible to prevent the fear from rising up in his heart. His cultivation base was lower than the clan chief's. Considering that the clan chief had already been captured, what would happen to him? Furthermore, when he saw how bedraggled the clan chief looked, his heart was seized with anxiety. I don't care how it happened, there's no way I'm going to risk putting myself in danger. Sweat popping out on his forehead, he unhesitatingly pulled out a teleportation talisman and crushed it. Rumbling sounds filled the air as he faded away. Scared him off? Bai Xiaochun muttered, looking surprised. Well, he has some common sense, that's for sure. More scared of death than I am. And he's in the nascent soul stage. He had already been prepared to capture him alive and truss him up like the clan chief. Shaking his head, he looked at the clan chief with his closed eyes and gritted teeth, and couldn't help but smile and sigh. This protective talisman really is useful. Feeling very pleased with himself, he continued along his way with the clan chief trussed up behind him. From that day on, every time someone from one of the auxiliary bloodlines of the Bai clan encountered him, they would look at the clan chief, gasp, and then flee. As for the clan chief, he preferred to simply remain unconscious. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had captured the clan chief alive proved that no one else could do anything to him. After all, no one among them had a higher cultivation base than the clan chief. Of course, the people from the direct bloodline were not so easily dissuaded. Considering that they could track him with the divine will seal, they began to team up and attack him in groups. When that happened, Bai Xiaochun would fight back and spill blood immediately. It wasn't just members of the Bai clan who saw him going along with the clan chief trussed up. This was giant ghost city territory, so there were many soul cultivators and necromancers who also saw the scene. Everyone who did was completely and utterly shocked. Who's that? And why does that person he has tied up look like the chief of the Bai clan? No way. More and more people saw what was happening, and many more heard the rumors. Soon, stories were spreading throughout giant ghost city territory. At first, the rumors spread quietly, mostly because people couldn't confirm their validity. But soon, after the representatives from the two clans returned to their homes, as did the emissary from Giant Ghost City, the whispered rumors turned into an explosive torrent of gossip. What? A Qilin's son rose up in the Bai clan and killed Bai Qi? He stole their Deva soul, survived an attack by their Deva patriarch, and then escaped. After he escaped, his own father, the clan chief, tried to kill him, but then got captured. Now the chief is tied up like a dog on his son's back for everyone to see? Heavens! This Bai Hao really did turn traitor against the Bai clan. The rumors grew more and more intense, until large numbers of people were paying very close attention to what was happening. News also began to spread of how Bai Xiaochun was killing many of the Bai clan cultivators who had been dispatched to chase him down. Before long, all of Giant Ghost City was in a commotion. Within the kingly city, the heavenly marquises and members of the other clans were deeply shaken. Everyone had heard that a Qilin's son named Bai Hao had emerged from the Bai clan, and that he had turned traitor, stealing the clan's Deva soul and even capturing his own father. Plus, he had killed many fellow clan members in ruthless fashion. I heard that he suffered in silence in that clan for years, and was bullied constantly. He even came close to death on numerous occasions. However, he endured quietly until they opened their ancestral land, which was when he exploded out in shocking fashion. That's nothing. I heard that this Bai Hao has shocking talent in flame conjuring. Also, his cultivation base is in the Great Circle of Core Formation. He's completely extraordinary. I can't believe the Bai clan is so short-sighted. But then again, this Bai Hao is clearly a vicious fellow. He actually kidnapped his own father. Everyone in the area of Giant Ghost City was talking about the matter, and not a single person wasn't shocked. Although very few people had ever even seen Bai Hao, they now had a mental image of him. He was completely sinister, with heaven-defying latent talent. At the same time, he had reviled his own clan, and was completely and utterly ruthless. Not only did the clans and the heavenly marquises learn about the matter, but word even spread to the very heart of Giant Ghost City. Located there was an enormous statue, upon the head of which was the royal palace. Within the royal palace was a towering figure in a kingly robe, standing at a railing, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked very majestic as he stood there looking out at heaven and earth. He seemed like the personification of the will of the heavens, the type of person who even a diva would tremble in the face of. It was as if in his presence, even heaven and earth would acquiesce. He bore the appearance of a middle-aged man, his features angular but extremely handsome. He seemed superior in all ways, the type of person who could dominate anything in sight. This man was none other than one of the 4 heavenly kings, and one of the most powerful people under the Arch-Emperor himself, the Giant Ghost King. He was a person who towered above all creation, and that was especially so in the current era, in which imperial power was waning. Any of the 4 heavenly kings were shocking figures who could shake the wildlands deeply wherever they went. 1. Bai Hao, the Giant Ghost King said softly. Interesting. A strange light flickered in his eyes, as if he were thinking. After a moment, he smiled faintly. Duke Deathcrier, he said loudly, why don't you go find this Bai Hao and bring him back here to Giant Ghost City? Arrange for a position for him as well. The Giant Ghost King's words were spoken with icy coldness, but at the same time, profound meaning could be seen within his smile. Even as his words echoed out, an old man appeared in the left hand of the enormous statue, which was itself another enormous palace. He seemed ancient to the extreme, with eyes that shone like the sun and moon. The aura which surrounded seemed to fuse with heaven and earth. Shockingly, this man was in the Deva realm. The old man clasped hands and bowed deeply. Yes, your majesty. Then he turned his head and simply vanished. Chuckling coldly, the Giant Ghost King said, if the Bai clan wants him dead, then I want him alive. The 3 great clans are most likely finishing their preparations. Let's see which of them will make the first move. To the Giant Ghost King, Bai Hao was insignificant, and in fact, his life or death didn't matter at all. However, considering that he was connected to the Bai clan, it meant that he was the perfect tool to feel them out. 1. Hey everyone, a quick note that the heavenly kings mentioned in this chapter are not the same as the undying heavenly king technique that Bai Xiaochun cultivates. In retrospect, I should have named the technique something else. In fact, I'm thinking of going back to make it the undying celestial king technique or maybe something completely different. Until then, though, just please be aware that the heavenly kings of the wildlands are completely unconnected to that technique, at least as far as the Chinese characters go. Since he's already finished with that level of the Undying Codex, I feel like it's not really a big deal at this point. Meanwhile, back in the Bai clan, silence prevailed. In the recent days, the matter of Bai Hao had become something of a crisis. Because of all the rumors spreading in the area, the entire clan was feeling unstable. Bai Hao had turned traitor, killed Bai Qi, stolen the Deva soul, captured the clan chief, and killed many of the direct bloodline clan members who had chased after him. Everyone in the clan was left with pounding hearts, especially in the higher echelons of leadership. Different people had different opinions, and many of the auxiliary bloodlines were using the matter to denounce the direct bloodline. Bai Hao is the true Qilin son of the Bai clan. You direct bloodline people forced him to turn traitor. He's a true chosen of the heavens. If he were still in the clan, he could break into the nascent soul stage and lead our clan to new heights. Talk like this grew more common. The more glory Bai Hao earned for himself, the uglier things got for the direct bloodline, and the more they wanted to kill him. Unfortunately, there was currently nothing they could do about that. Considering that he had already killed some of the mid-nascent soul clan elders, what could anyone else do? Some of the clan elders who were in the late nascent soul stage went out to try to capture him, but none of them succeeded. The direct bloodline was being completely routed. The Grand Elder of the Hall of Justice was not part of the direct bloodline, and although he had followed the orders of the Patriarch to send people out to search for Bai Hao, it was obvious that any failure to catch him was really the fault of the direct bloodline. When Madame Kai looked around at the situation in the clan, she felt bitterness and despair in her heart. In the past, it would have been impossible for her to even imagine that a nobody like Bai Hao would end up causing such a commotion. Her son had been killed and her husband taken captive, and it left her heart feeling like it was being ripped apart. At the same time, her venomous hatred for Bai Hao had reached indescribable proportions. If it weren't for the fact that there was a Deva patriarch in the clan, fighting would have already broken out. Therefore, all of the conflict was happening behind the scenes. Most importantly, the Deva patriarch hadn't yet stated his opinion on the matter. The auxiliary bloodlines were all waiting to see who the Deva patriarch would side with. That would be very telling. However, at the moment, the Deva patriarch was not interested in paying attention to what was happening within the clan. In fact, he didn't even really care that the clan chief had been captured. As long as the clan itself still stood, he was content. Worst case scenario, he would have to select a new clan chief. Right, the main thing on his mind was Bai Hao. What a bunch of good-for-nothing fools. I can't believe the whole clan has been mobilized, and even then they can't bring Bai Hao back. A look of determination appeared in the patriarch's eyes as he sat there in his subterranean chamber. I can't keep waiting. If things go on too much longer, and the giant ghost king interferes, then I will have lost an important opportunity. I guess I just need to risk it. Gritting his teeth, he rose to his feet. Something profound and unfathomable could be seen in his eyes as he looked around at the green flames of the 7 flickering candles around him. After a moment passed, he took a deep breath, and then stepped forward. That single step caused a wind to spring up in the chamber around him. The flames of the 7 candles danced, and then began to wink out. Without any hesitation, the patriarch stepped beyond the spell formation created by the candles, whereupon all of the flames vanished. At that point, cracking sounds could be heard from inside the patriarch, almost like bones grating against each other. Then, all traces of withering on his body vanished, and he became a middle-aged man. Shocking cultivation base fluctuations rumbled out, and his eyes flashed as if with lightning. The way he stood there made him seem like he was the representative of the will of the heavens. My 7 life-locking candles can lock my longevity in place and help me live a bit longer. Unfortunately, I can only use them once in my lifetime. Bai Hao, you had better not disappoint me. Eyes shining with profound maliciousness, he tore a rift open in the air in front of him, stepped through it, and vanished. In that same instant, a peal of thunder shook the sky above the Bai clan. Quite some distance away from the Bai clan, Bai Xiaochun was speeding through the air. He had killed quite a few members of the Bai clan recently, although it was not because he had taken the initiative to attack them, but rather because they had insisted on surrounding him and ambushing him. When Bai Xiaochun fought back, he struck to kill. He had even killed 3 clan elders so far. By this point, he was almost at the border of the region considered Giant Ghost City territory. At the moment, his face was bright red, and as he flew along, he performed constant double-handed incantation gestures, and would then slap his hands down onto himself. This was a secret magic he had picked up in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, useful for expelling sealing marks. By using the power of his own chi and blood, he was able to remove all sealing marks from inside of himself, and although it worked well, the power of the seals themselves was a critical factor. If they were weak, they could be dispelled easily, but if they were powerful, it could take years or even longer. Another factor was the strength of one's own qi and blood. Thankfully, Bai Xiaochun had particularly strong qi and blood. After several days of utilizing this secret magic, it was having an effect. At a certain point very close to the border of Giant Ghost City, he suddenly stopped in place and coughed up a mouthful of blood. This particular batch of blood wasn't red, but rather brown. As soon as it was ejected from within his mouth, it swirled through the air to form a head, with the face of the Bai clan's Deva patriarch. The face stared malevolently at Bai Xiaochun for a moment before fading away. Bai Xiaochun wiped the remaining blood from his lips and let out a long sigh. At long last, he felt completely free and clear. At least I finally got that damned sealing mark out of me. Feeling much more relaxed, and even enlivened, he began moving again. 4 hours at the most, and I'll be out in the desert. Out there. The Bai clan will never be able to find me now that I've gotten rid of the sealing mark. As he moved along, he pulled Bai Hao's notes out of his bag of holding and began to study them. These notes were Bai Hao's life's work, complete with his augury technique, as well as detailed information about souls and multicolored flame. Bai Xiaochun had studied the information frequently over the past few days, and had benefited significantly every time he did. At the same time, he sighed constantly about the fact that Bai Hao had been killed. The kid had incredible talents. If he had lived, then as my apprentice, he could have directly helped me with his augury. With his help, I wouldn't have needed to go anywhere to figure out the formulas. We could have done it together. Sighing, he picked up speed. About the time that Bai Xiaochun was finally removing the sealing mark from within him, there was an ordinary nascent soul cultivator flying through the air some distance away on a soul ship. Suddenly, the old man's face fell, and he stopped moving. That old man was one of the direct bloodline members in the late nascent soul stage who had been chasing after him. He was the last member of the direct bloodline who had any hope of actually catching up to Bai Xiaochun. Moments ago, the divine will seal that had enabled him to track Bai Xiaochun had suddenly vanished. The Wildlands was a huge place, so without that sealing mark, it would be virtually impossible to find Bai Xiaochun. The old man flew as quickly as possible in the direction he had been moving, but had no hope that Bai Hao would be so stupid as to just sit there waiting around. Before long, the old nascent soul cultivator reached the last spot he knew the sealing mark had been, only to look around and find nothing. Furthermore, there was no indication which direction his quarry had taken. To the west is the desert. To the north is the ageless frigid river. To the east is the imperial city. Which way would Bai Hao have gone? Further away, the Deva patriarch was flying through the air, his expression extremely grim. It doesn't matter that you erased my sealing mark. Devas can do things beyond your imagination. There is nowhere you could possibly run to that I couldn't find you. His right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and he waved his finger, causing his body to age visibly, but at the same time, creating ripples in the air in front of him, ripples which rapidly coalesced into the shape of a screen. Within the screen, a vast wasteland was visible, into which the Deva patriarch stepped. A moment later, he was actually within the wasteland, where he once again used the same method. And then again. By the third time, the image he summoned revealed Bai Xiaochun, speeding along. Not slow at all. Really looks like you live up to expectations. Grinning, the patriarch stepped into the screen. This area was still considered to be under the control of Giant Ghost City, and therefore, could be considered to belong to the Giant Ghost King himself. And of course, the Giant Ghost King was a person who surpassed the heavens in terms of status here. Bai Xiaochun was reaching the border, however. He could actually see the vast desert off in the distance, a place filled with swirling winds. Eyes sparkling because of the enlightenment from Bai Hao's notes, he gathered his thoughts and then pushed on toward the desert. I'll head out into the desert for a few months to let the situation calm down. Then I'll consider whether to come back here, or go to one of the other kingly cities. All of them have teleportation portals that could get me home. In the meantime, I can spend more time studying Bai Hao's notes. By this point, he felt that he had made significant progress when it came to 13-colored flame, and was getting more confident in succeeding with it. It was in that moment that suddenly, his expression flickered, and he looked up into the air. When he did, his pupils constricted as he laid eyes on an enormous vortex rumbling into existence. Within a single breath of time, it transformed into a 30,000-meter wide portal, from within which erupted shocking pressure. Rumble. A tremor ran through the lands, and then all of the soil suddenly went completely still, as if the entire area had been cut away from heaven and earth to become its own special space. Bai Xiaochun's breath caught in his throat, and he felt as if the air around him had solidified. The pressure weighing down made it almost impossible to move. The clan chief's eyes snapped open, and he shouted, "Patriarch! This Bai clan patriarch seems even stronger than Mistress Red Dust." Up above in the huge vortex, the image of a face appeared, which was none other than the face of the Deva patriarch, staring down coldly at Bai Xiaochun. A core formation cultivator dares defy the heavens. He spoke exactly 8 words, which, as they left his mouth, became 8 magical symbols, dazzling and bright, that instantly shot toward Bai Xiaochun. As they flew through the air, the symbols transformed into 8 giants clad in golden armor. Bai Xiaochun was immediately shaken. The Deva's mere words immediately transformed into soldiers willing to follow his every command. He now realized that he had underestimated Devas. During his fight with Mistress Red Dust, she had been affected by a curse, and had been unable to use some of her most powerful divine abilities. Furthermore, she was also on a lesser level than this Bai clan patriarch. It was a moment of critical danger. 8 golden-armored giants were bearing down on him, howling and roaring. That was when afterimages blurred around him, not 1, but 4. However, he wasn't summoning his clones. He was directly drawing on the power of their cultivation bases, fleshly bodies, and divine sense. He was making himself 4 times stronger. Rumble. Moments before, the pressure surrounding him had been sealing him in place, but now, fissures spread out in the air around him. In almost the same moment that the 8 golden-armored giants arrived, he looked up and roared, simultaneously flying backward at top speed. Then, a boom echoed out as the 8 giants landed in the spot he had just occupied. As they did, they transformed into 8 golden chains that sealed the entire area. During the process, the clan chief was sent tumbling off to the side, where he coughed up a mouthful of blood before lapsing into unconsciousness. Very interesting. The Deva patriarch's eyes flickered with surprise. Back in the Bai clan, his cultivation base had been limited because of his 7 life-locking candles, and he had been unable to personally take charge of the situation. That was why Bai Xiaochun had been able to flee to begin with, and had not actually been completely surprising. But now, here he was in person, and his quarry was still causing problems for him, which he actually found quite interesting. The huge face in the vortex began to shrink down until it formed the patriarch himself, hovering there in midair, emanating an aura that seemed capable of causing instant transformations in heaven and earth. He wore a white robe, and had an icy cold expression on his face as he looked down at Bai Xiaochun. Then he took a step forward, a step which caused an enormous foot to appear up above in the sky. The 3,000-meter-long foot descended, destroying the clouds and causing the lands below to shake. Even the air distorted as the foot rumbled toward Bai Xiaochun. The foot caused incredible pressure to weigh down on Bai Xiaochun, almost as if the will of the heavens were crushing onto him. There were a few reasons Mistress Red Dust ended up being at such a disadvantage when they fought. Because of being in the 2nd-generation Arch-Emperor's sepulchre, and because of the curse she had suffered, she wasn't able to draw upon the power of heaven and earth. Even despite that, Bai Xiaochun had barely been able to escape with his life. Now, he could see how truly powerful Devas were. The Bai clan Deva patriarch was fighting right outside his own city, in an area he was very familiar with. He was able to fight with the true power of a Deva. Bai Xiaochun was shocked, and it only took a moment for him to realize why the Bai clan patriarch seemed so much stronger than Mistress Red Dust. There wasn't time to ponder the situation, though. He was gripped by a sensation of deadly crisis, and knew that if he tried to directly fight against this huge foot, he would likely be wiped out of existence. As his mind spun, the foot closed in, and he took a step back. During that process, his body began to fade, and then he suddenly disappeared. In the moment he disappeared, the foot landed, crashing into the ground and causing countless amounts of dust and rubble to rise up. "You won't be able to escape from me a second time," the patriarch said coolly. He waved his hand, causing rumbling sounds to fill the air as another huge vortex appeared. The patriarch moved his right hand, causing the vortex to spin and simultaneously echo with thunderous roars. At the same time, a powerful gravitational force erupted, causing the air to distort as the power of time travel appeared. This wasn't the true power of time travel, but it did wrap up everything in the area and pull it toward the vortex with destructive force, including nearby boulders, trees, and even mountains. At the same time, some distance off, Bai Xiaochun was fleeing with the power of his undying hex. However, as soon as the Deva patriarch unleashed his shocking magic, Bai Xiaochun's face fell, and his technique was interrupted. As soon as he appeared in the open, the shocking gravitational force grabbed onto him, and began to drag him backward toward the vortex. Even as it did, his eyes sparkled, and he spun in place. Then, afterimages blurred around him as he performed a double-handed incantation gesture and then threw his hands up above him. Water Swamp Kingdom. His 4 clones stepped out to surround him, and also unleashed their water swamp kingdoms. Instantly, a watery swamp appeared, and the shocking roar of a beast echoed out from inside. Then, numerous spike-like mountains began to rise up. Rumble. The 5 curved, mountain-like claws that appeared created a scene that would shock anyone who was able to observe it. As they appeared in the open, the sky dimmed, and they slashed toward the vortex. What is that? Up till now, the Deva Patriarch had remained completely cool and expressionless. But when the life essence spirit of Bai Xiaochun's water swamp kingdom appeared, his face fell. The claws of Bai Xiaochun's life essence spirit brimmed with mind-bogglingly deadly energy. 5 curved, mountain-like claws with all destructive power shot directly toward the enormous vortex. When the two struck each other, a deafening boom filled the area. The sky went dim, and a huge blast of wind filled the area, a shockwave that rolled out in all directions. However, the vortex was backed by the power of a Deva, and although Bai Xiaochun's water swamp kingdom was powerful, considering the current level of his cultivation base, that power was limited. Moments after the initial collision, the claws vanished, and the water swamp kingdom faded away. The only thing that remained was an echoing, beastly cry. However, the attack had not been completely ineffective. Cracking sounds echoed out from the vortex, and 5 enormous rifts appeared within it. Those rifts grew wider and wider, casting the gravitational force into chaos. The vortex even started to wobble on the verge of collapsing. Bai Xiaochun's face was pale as he coughed up a mouthful of blood. His clones all seemed to be in a similar state, and quickly returned into his true self. Then, Bai Xiaochun glared up at the Deva Patriarch, and slowly pulled out his crystalline soul-hoarding pagoda. His eyes shone with madness, his aura was teetering unstably, and he was trembling physically. However, there was no time to sit around thinking about what to do. He quickly sent some divine sense into the soul-hoarding pagoda. With a single thought, he could break the seal inside, and release the destructive power of the demigod soul. "Don't push me too far, old man," he said, his eyes shining with madness. He wasn't completely sure whether the discarnate demigod soul could really kill the Deva Patriarch, but if it did, perhaps he would be able to get his hands on the final Deva soul he needed. Even as the thought entered his mind, he shook his head and dismissed it. He didn't even know how to properly harvest the soul of a Deva who had perished. Most likely, only a demigod cultivator could actually do something like that. Besides, it was likely that he wouldn't even be able to kill the Bai clan patriarch. However, he was confident in being able to seriously injure him in a way that he couldn't quickly recover from. And that would likely give him enough time to get out of giant ghost city territory. The Deva Patriarch's eyes narrowed as he looked at the soul-hoarding pagoda Bai Xiaochun held, from which he couldn't sense anything dangerous. Then he looked back up at Bai Xiaochun, and his eyes began to shine with a strange light. "I really did underestimate you, kid. Well, that's fine. Wonderful, in fact. I'm not sure how you reached this amazing level, but I can sense from your blood that you really are from the Bai clan. Truly spectacular." Smiling faintly, he lifted his foot again and began to take a step. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun shouted loudly, preparing to break the seal in the soul-hoarding pagoda. However, in that very moment, a bellow filled the area that caused everything to shake. At the same time, a whistling sound could be heard, as though someone were approaching the area at top speed. "Stay your hand, Brother Bai. I'm here with orders from Giant Ghost King himself. He's issued a summons for Bai Hao." The Bai clan patriarch's face fell, and his eyes flickered with indecision for the briefest of moments before he stepped down with his foot, instantly placing him in front of Bai Xiaochun, whom he reached out to grab. However, Bai Xiaochun had been ready. The moment he saw the patriarch's foot moving, he shot backward. However, instead of using his soul-hoarding pagoda, he summoned his 4 clones to defend himself. A boom filled the area, and his 4 clones coughed up blood before shooting back into his body. However, they had bought him the time he needed to once again use his undying hex. Right before the Deva Patriarch's hand reached him, he vanished. The Deva Patriarch's eyes flashed with cold light as he turned to look in a different direction. "Show your face." His words seemed to replace the will of the heavens, causing crushing pressure to appear that wrenched Bai Xiaochun out into the open, blood oozing out of the corners of his mouth. His hair was in complete disarray, and cracking sounds could be heard as the air around him shattered. Although it seemed as if heaven and earth were about to stamp him out of existence, his eyes flickered with an imperceptible gleam. And that was because the instant he appeared in the open, a golden beam of light shot through the air toward him. Even as the Deva patriarch took control over heaven and earth in the area, a whooshing sound could be heard, and a jade pendant appeared in front of Bai Xiaochun. The pendant emanated golden light, and was carved with the image of a two-horned giant ghost that was roaring to the sky. As soon as the jade pendant appeared, the cracking, shattering air around Bai Xiaochun stabilized. The Bai clan patriarch's face turned very grim as the air rippled, and an old man appeared. He wore a black robe, and his face was completely expressionless. However, his cultivation base fluctuations were no weaker than the Bai clan patriarch's. He seemed icy cold and completely sinister, and caused the air around him to ripple. It was almost as if two streams of divine will had clashed, causing thunder to echo out and crackles of lightning to appear. Even the ground began to quake. Bai Xiaochun looked at the jade pendant and then the old man, and his heart began to pound. When he had initially fled the Bai clan, he had hoped that other clans or groups in the area would try to take advantage of the situation, and perhaps help him. After a while, he had come to suspect it wouldn't happen after all. But now that this black-robed old man was here, it was obvious that the giant ghost king had taken an interest. Bai Xiaochun's eyes narrowed, and his heart began to twinge with nervousness. He kept his hand clenched onto the soul-hoarding pagoda, ready to detonate the demigod soul at a moment's notice. The Bai clan patriarch stared grimly at the black-robed man, and then spoke in a voice as cold as ice. "This is a private matter of the Bai clan, Deathcrier." "What's the meaning of this?" "There are no private matters for subordinates of the heavenly kings," Duke Deathcrier replied. Eyes flashing with cold light, he took a step forward, causing a powerful wind to spring up around him. "Are you going to disobey the decrees of His Heavenly Majesty, Bai Xiaochun?" The Deva patriarch looked back grimly at Duke Deathcrier, then waved his hand, causing the unconscious clan chief to vanish, then reappear next to him. "Since His Highness the King has summoned this rebel, then of course I won't interfere." Gritting his teeth inwardly, the Deva patriarch clasped hands and bowed to the jade pendant, then looked back at the black-robed old man. "However, I will have to go visit His Highness the King personally to get to the bottom of this matter." During the entire exchange between the two Devas, the patriarch never once looked at Bai Xiaochun. Finally, he turned and vanished. At that point, everything in the area went back to normal. The thunder faded away, the lightning vanished, and finally, Bai Xiaochun breathed a sigh of relief. Relaxing his grip on the soul-hoarding pagoda, he looked over at Duke Deathcrier. Duke Deathcrier looked in the direction in which the Bai clan patriarch had left, then turned his lightning-like gaze onto Bai Xiaochun. He was wizened and skinny, with a hawk-like nose that made him seem particularly sinister. Furthermore, his gaze was so sharp that it seemed to pierce all the way into Bai Xiaochun's heart and mind. "Come with me. From now on, your life is in my hands, and you work for His Highness the King." The man didn't say anything about the Deva soul. Apparently, he didn't want to get too involved in the affairs of the Bai clan. Bai Xiaochun's eyes widened into a glare, and he impulsively roared, "Bullcrap. My life belongs to me, not anybody else." At least, that was what happened in his mind. The words that came out of his mouth were a bit different. Face filled with gratitude, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. "Greetings, Senior Deathcrier. Many thanks for the kindness of saving my life. Don't thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank His Highness the King." With that, Duke Deathcrier waved his hand, causing everything within 30 meters to suddenly blur and ripple, as if it were separating from the area around it. Bai Xiaochun's heart trembled as he looked around at what was happening. Soon, it became clear that what was actually happening was some sort of major teleportation. It was almost as if the entire area were simply being plucked up and moved somewhere else. Rumbling sounds filled his ears, and then everything vanished. When he and Duke Deathcrier reappeared, they were in front of a spectacularly immense city. It was currently afternoon, and brilliant sunlight shone down on the enormous city, making it seem particularly impressive. It looked like some primeval beast, bearing its fangs at all creation. And that was just the sense Bai Xiaochun got without even looking closely at it. Even at a glance, Giant Ghost City seemed to be as big as 10,000 Bai clans put together. There were countless richly ornamented buildings and other dazzling structures, and the entire city seemed filled with the auras of innumerable soul cultivators and necromancers. Bai Xiaochun had never seen a place as big as this before. The population must surely be in the tens of millions. Even more shocking was that Giant Ghost City itself existed in the middle of a massive, bottomless pit. The pit was so wide that not even divine sense could span it from one side to the other. And that was just the width, not the depth. Giant Ghost City is big, but this pit is even bigger. The city could fit inside of it dozens of times over. Giant Ghost City itself existed on a huge column that rose up from within the bottomless pit. Far down in the pit was a hazy mist filled with endless vicious faces and heads, a horde of ghostly souls which screamed constantly. To get from the cliffs that were the border of the pit to the city itself, one had to cross any one of a number of violet chains, each one of which as thick as a person was tall. They hung like suspension bridges over the misty depths of the pit. Bai Xiaochun could see people off in the distance, flying toward the city in beams of light. However, they didn't dare to fly over the pit and into the city, but instead dropped to the ground and then walked along the huge chains. Going or coming, that was the only way to get into the city. As Bai Xiaochun continued to examine the area, he realized to his shock that in the middle of the city was an enormous, shocking statue. It was a giant ghost with 2 horns on its head and green skin, tens upon tens of thousands of meters high. It was so high that it seemed to be holding up the sky. Furthermore, on its head was a royal palace. The palace itself was difficult to make out, and although it was impossible to tell who resided there, it didn't take much guesswork on Bai Xiaochun's part to come up with an idea. That must be where Giant Ghost King lives. Even just looking at the royal palace, Bai Xiaochun could sense a pressure like that of all heaven and earth weighing down on him. It left him with the sensation that whoever was in that royal palace was not a person, but rather, some sort of god. Another shocking thing he noticed was the giant statue held a palace in each of its hands. Furthermore, both palaces had huge stone stels in front of them, with the name of the palace inscribed for anyone to see. In the left hand was Deathcrier Palace, and in the right hand was the Netherworld Palace. Bai Xiaochun was shaken by the mere sight, and was immediately certain that those palaces belonged to Devas. And considering that the left-hand palace was named Deathcrier, he was 80 to 90% sure that it belonged to the black-robed old man standing next to him. Bai Xiaochun was not as ignorant about Giant Ghost City as he had been when he first arrived in the Wildlands. During his days in the Bai clan, he had done quite a bit of digging around for information, and now knew a little bit about the place. For example, he knew that Giant Ghost City consisted of an inner and outer city. The inner city was strictly controlled, and only people with high status could enter it. Most of the people who lived there were nobility, ministers, and other people with close connections to the royal house. The outer city was where the common people lived, and was a much livelier place. There was a moat that separated the inner and outer cities, the water of which contained demigod-level restrictive spells. Without the proper command medallion, anyone who tried to cross that moat would be melted into nothing but bones. Bai Xiaochun's heart was already pounding as he wondered why he had been brought to Giant Ghost City. Although he was very nervous, he put on the most charming expression possible as he stood there behind Duke Deathcrier. He had already decided that, no matter why the Giant Ghost King had summoned him, it was a good thing to be in Giant Ghost City. After all, the teleportation portal he needed to access to get back home was located in this very city. If my mask can fool the Bai clan's spell formation, and their Deva, he murmured to himself, then it should be able to fool the teleportation portal, right? Duke Deathcrier's face was completely expressionless as he led the way, and he didn't say a single word. Furthermore, they didn't enter the city via the chains, but rather, by flying directly into the city. As soon as they appeared in the city, the soul cultivator guards on duty looked over with reverent expressions and bowed respectfully. Greetings, Duke Deathcrier. In addition to bowing and greeting, everyone surreptitiously sized up Bai Xiaochun, which he noticed. As he proceeded along, he decided that since the Giant Ghost King had summoned him, he should be on his best behavior. Perhaps, if Duke Deathcrier put in a good word for him, he could get a high position in the city. That way, the Bai clan definitely wouldn't be able to touch him. Wait, no, that would be too dangerous. I need to figure out a way to get to that teleportation portal and get back to the Great Wall. It's just too bad that I'm still missing a Deva soul. With such thoughts on his mind, he followed Duke Deathcrier through the city. Duke Deathcrier led him directly toward the inner city, and within the space of a few breaths of time, they were standing in front of the moat that separated the two cities. The water was black, and looked incredibly dangerous. In fact, Bai Xiaochun even took a few steps back when he saw it. Then he looked over at Duke Deathcrier, wondering why they had stopped moving. Senior, aren't we supposed to be going over there? Blinking, he looked meaningfully toward the giant ghost statue. Ignoring Bai Xiaochun, Duke Deathcrier coolly said, Li Shu, get out here immediately. His voice didn't seem to echo out very far. However, in response, the waters of the moat rippled, and then a whirlpool appeared, out of which stepped 3 middle-aged men. Bai Xiaochun could already sense that something was off about the situation. Why wasn't he being taken to see the giant ghost king? Of the 3 newcomers, the man in the lead position wore a green robe, and was clearly half a step into the Deva realm. As for the other two, they seemed a bit weaker, and were obviously the man's subordinates. The green-robed man immediately flew over to stand in front of Duke Deathcrier, where he clasped hands and bowed deeply. "Greetings, Duke Deathcrier." Duke Deathcrier gestured at Bai Xiaochun and then said, "This is Bai Hao. I'm handing him over to you. Set him up as a guard in Devil Penitentiary." Li Shu and his two subordinates immediately voiced their assent. Without another word, Duke Deathcrier turned and flew toward the giant ghost statue. His mission from the king had been to bring Bai Hao back and then give him a job in the city. As for what exact position to give him, the giant ghost king naturally didn't care. Therefore, Duke Deathcrier didn't put much thought into the matter, and simply handed him over to the city's famous Devil Penitentiary. Devil Penitentiary? A guard? When Bai Xiaochun heard what had just been said, his jaw dropped. He had assumed that the giant ghost king must have summoned him to be at least a bodyguard of some sort. Never could he have imagined that he was to be a prison guard. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.